While Texas Democrats, eager for a November blue wave, turned out in droves for Tuesday's primary election, casting more than 1 million ballots for the first time since 2002. A record-setting 1.5 million voters cast ballots in the Republican primary for governor, the most since at least 1970. Though just 5 months ago, a politically unknown figure, local prosecutor turned defense attorney Joe Gonzales, is now at the center of attention after knocking out his former business partner and incumbent district attorney Nico LaHood in an 18-point victory that sets up a general election race between Gonzales and uncontested Republican nominee Tylden Shaeffer. Victorious Republican legislators Governor Greg Abbott unsuccessfully targeted during the primary election campaign say he has not only hurt his own reputation, but also endangered the party they share by creating vulnerabilities for energized Democrats. And federal prosecutors are seeking a restraining order to prevent convicted Democratic State Senator Carlos Uresti from squandering assets in order to avoid paying creditors. Good morning. Those are your headlines from expressnews.com. I'm Chance Dorling with your Express News briefing for Thursday, March 8th. Brought to you this morning by North Park Mazda, the #1 Mazda dealer in Texas last month. As Texas Democrats seek to seize on an anti-Trump sentiment this election cycle, the state's Republicans still have sheer numbers on their side, as a record-setting 1.5 million voters cast ballots in the Republican primary for governor, the most since at least 1970, in what appears to be an uphill battle for a party that hasn't had a statewide victory in more than 2 decades. And in the high-profile race for U.S. Senate, while charismatic Democratic Congressman Beto O'Rourke is raising millions of dollars in an effort to unseat Republican Ted Cruz, Tuesday, Cruz scored more than 1.3 million votes in the GOP primary, roughly 300,000 more than were cast on the Democratic side in total, and about 670,000 more than O'Rourke. But Democrats, who haven't won a stateside race since 1994, are still pointing to enthusiasm they say is on their side. For the first time in 25 years, the left is fielding candidates in all 36 congressional districts, including those in solidly red areas. And the party has boosted voter turnout in midterm primaries over the past 10 years, more than doubling participation in this year's primary from 2014 levels. And for the first time in a decade, more people voted early in the Democratic primary than in the Republican one in the state's 15 largest counties. While attorney Joe Gonzales secured the Democratic nomination for Bexar County District Attorney before 9 p.m. on Tuesday night, he only managed to fit in 2 hours of sleep before the interviews began after knocking off his former business partner and incumbent DA Nico LaHood. A politically unknown attorney just 5 months ago, Gonzales says while his team thought they would have a slight lead going into the early vote, his early and decisive primary result was a pleasant shock. The 18-point victory sets up a general election race between 2 former local prosecutors turned defense attorneys, as Gonzales now looks to take on uncontested Republican nominee Tylden Shaeffer in what looks to be an issues-based race after a Democratic primary where cordial discussion took a backseat to personal attacks, with Shaeffer promising Wednesday that the two are going to talk about real issues. Gonzales and Shaeffer met more than 2 decades ago in the Bexar County District Attorney's office, where they overlapped as prosecutors. And while Gonzales notes they haven't spoken much since announcing their candidacies, he doesn't consider Shaeffer an enemy. Gonzales also reports since his victory Tuesday night, he has not heard from incumbent Bexar County District Attorney Nico LaHood. 2 Republicans targeted by Governor Greg Abbott came roaring out of their primary victory, saying that rather than curbing dissent, the governor has hurt his own reputation and endangered the party they share. San Antonio Representative Lyle Larson, who beat Abbott-backed Hollywood Park Mayor Chris Fales, says while the move may not impair Abbott's own re-election, it creates a lot of vulnerabilities as energized Democrats focus on congressional and legislative opportunities, sizing up the situation as one where, quote, "our general turned around and started shooting at us." West University Place Representative Sarah Davis also had harsh words for the governor after defending her own office against an Abbott-endorsed candidate, noting that no amount of money in a campaign account can buy back your reputation when you squander it by making false accusations. Abbott had accused Davis of wanting to take money from disaster relief funds that ended up being needed to help address the devastation of Hurricane Harvey. Davis had argued against using disaster relief money to fund a bill she carried to help children with severe disabilities, but the House voted to go that route over her objections. Galveston Representative Wayne Faircloth was also targeted by Abbott but was defeated. All three had supported restrictions on the governor's power to appoint donors to powerful state boards in a bill originally authored by San Antonio Representative Lyle Larson. The governor now holds the cards on the future of that so-called pay-for-play bill that Larson maintains was not aimed at Abbott, but rather a long-standing practice, noting that he wants to work with the governor's staff to find a version of the measure Abbott could support, even if that means making it apply only after Abbott leaves office. And federal prosecutors are seeking a restraining order to prohibit recently convicted Democratic State Senator Carlos Uresti from squandering his assets in order to avoid creditors. The filing comes 2 weeks after a jury found Uresti guilty of 11 felony charges over his involvement in now-defunct San Antonio oil fracking company Four Winds Logistics that defrauded investors. While Uresti now faces years in federal prison, he also could owe millions in restitution to victims of the fraud. And while the government made its request just days after Uresti's wife filed divorce papers, noting adultery as one of the reasons for wanting to end their nearly 6-year marriage, it isn't clear as of now if the divorce petition prompted the government to seek the restraining order. And that's your Express News Briefing for Thursday, March 8th from expressnews.com. Brought to you this morning by North Park Mazda, the #1 Mazda dealer in Texas last month. I'm Chance Dorland.